My name is Shannon Dobbs. I am the founder of Fellowship of Living Systems. It is a public benefit company that is focused on connecting communities with powerful tools and strategies to be able to elevate their impact to climate adaptation and resilience.
You're watching Success, Motivation, and Inspiration, where we share interviews with incredible leaders who are crushing it in life and business.
Hey, welcome back to Success, Motivation, and Inspiration. Shannon, glad to have you on the show, man.
Glad to be here, Curtis. Thanks for having me on.
You describe yourself as a systems thinker. What does that look like in your everyday work?
So just to start, I don't work. I retired and sold my business in 2017. And so basically I went through the rat race process and figured out kind of my way out of it, and then immediately dove into community support efforts. And so what systems thinking really is it begins in my experience in the military. I was in the Army Special Ops community as essentially a systems thinker. I was a troubleshooter, intelligence analyst. I was working on hearts and minds campaigns and different coalition building elements. And then in 1995, I got severely injured from a parachuting accident, and my unit diverted me over to our arms room as the assistant supply sergeant while we were figuring out, kind of what my ultimate, like, where is this going, to see whether I would heal up. And they put me in as an additional duty as the battalion armorer. And so I got to understand that level of systems and how logistics works and supply chain economics in the military works. After I got out of the Army, I eventually made my way up to Northern Nevada and took over a community bar in downtown Reno. And so I got to understand, ground level mercantile systems and how that connects up with our supply chains at multiple levels, and how to, create communications, how to get up in front of city council and advocate, for our neighborhood. I got on the Merchants Association and got to understand how those systems work. And then after I sold my business, I got into nonprofit world, founded a nonprofit called On Common Ground. We were originally working to get a grocery store into downtown Reno. And so we started navigating those systems, like how do we get food access into inner city communities? And that's kind of been the trend ever since then, is really just understanding the world that we live in from a systemic level and understanding how we can navigate through it better if we understand the tools and the elements that it consists of, and learn how to walk those paths.
Now, how did your background in Army Special Operations logistics shape your approach to problem solving?
A lot of it was the scrounging. My supply sergeant was an absolute master at what's called scrounging in the military, which is basically creative resource acquisition. I remember one time he scored two 5-ton trucks full of supplies from a Marine Corps supply sergeant a state away. And we got in we went down to the motor pool and picked up our vehicles, and we drove down to the state and we loaded up our truck and brought it back and filled up Conaxes. And that was the process that we were able to trade different goods to be able to get our mission accomplished. Because a lot of times the reality is in the military, the supply chain system is a little bit dysfunctional. And if you are an enlisted soldier in that world and your job is to get shit done no matter what, you have to get creative sometimes in how you go about it. And a lot of times it's creative navigation. A lot of it's understanding who's working in different systems and how to navigate I say unconventional, but a lot of times it's just unofficial channels.
I've actually interviewed a few different. Jeff Wobig was a Navy SEAL Team sniper, SEAL Team 5, SEAL Team 7, Operation Rhino Wars. Stud, but it's always cool talking to guys that think outside the box and can figure out how to get stuff done outside of the typical process or structures.
Yeah. So if you can imagine the special ops community as that kind of macro lens, we were the support mechanism inside the special ops community for some of the other guys that you've trained.
That's awesome. Now, tell me about your transition from running successful nightclubs to launching living systems.
It's been a long, strange road. I got to be honest with you. I was running nightclubs up in Northern Nevada for a bunch of years. In 2015, I had the opportunity. I had a very large former casino building that I was running a nightclub on the second level, and it had gone out of business because there'd been some property damage on the roof that caused flooding. And so we were trying to figure out what to do with this property. And right about then, an article came out where the mayor was quoted as asking, why can't we get a grocery store in downtown Reno? And as a business owner, I was looking at it like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, why don't you know the answer to that question? And so I had this 17,000 square foot commercial space on the ground level that I wasn't doing anything with. And I had this bright idea, hey, maybe we can get this fixed. create a win-win situation. I'll just donate the use of the space and we'll figure it all out together and we'll get the groceries and we'll answer that question. I reached out to the city of Reno, found out that they didn't actually care that much, and they were really just trying to hook a Trader Joe's or something like that into downtown. Reached out to contractors, reached out to nonprofits, kept getting the same response. This isn't our lane. This isn't our job. This isn't our problem. This is somebody else. Go find, pedal this shit down the street is basically what I got. And finally, in the beginning of 2016, my ex-wife used to write grants for the fire department up in that area. And so we had been talking and we just realized like there's no reason why we shouldn't just do this since nobody else is doing it. This is obviously a hole in our system where all of the institutions are basically saying, not my problem. And so, we just made the decision. We're like, all right, fuck it, we're going to do it. And so
That's
I think it was February 2016, we filed the documents and formed On Common Ground as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And from that point forward, I mean, that's basically what I was doing. I was still running the bar. I think the first year, not a whole lot got accomplished, but I was asking a lot of questions, reaching out through the communities, starting to develop those relationships and really figuring out what is the scope of the problem. Like, why can't we get a grocery store into downtown Reno since 1987?
that's crazy. And is that ocgnews.com or is that a different? What, do you
Yeah,
still have the domain
definitely
for that?
different. Yeah, the organization no longer exists. Once I
Okay.
moved out of Nevada, I mean, there's a whole long backstory about what happened with that grocery store. We didn't end up getting it open. We got rejected by the city repeatedly. The nonprofit organizations turned their back on us. We finally got a lease agreement with a property owner on Fourth Street for an incubator project. I worked through my contacts in the burner community down there, and so we got that established. I managed to secure $130,000+ worth of fixtures and refrigeration equipment from a Long's Drugs location that had been basically never opened from 10 years before. And the job leader talked to his boss. They managed to get donated to our organization. So we were in business. We were ready to go.
Wow.
Started to build the whole thing out. Community pressure got so bad that the property owner changed the locks on us and kicked us off property. Hadn't violated any terms of the lease. It was just, community pressure basically saying, we don't want this here. And that ended up turning into a whole thing. So, October 2019, I went to the board and let them know, hey, in my assessment, I don't think we're going to be able to do this here. We as an organization should start looking outside of this area, seeing where the fertile ground is, seeing like who wants to actually accomplish these challenges and who wants to fix these problems in their communities. And we need to, as an organization, kind of shift and pivot. So that became the new goal of On Common Ground. A couple of years later, I moved to Mexico, then came back in country and moved to Colorado, kind of started doing advocacy work up in this area. And that had, by the time I'd come back in the country, I had a much expanded understanding of the challenges that we were collectively dealing with. And I was able to start applying different lenses and even an international focus to what was going on. I'd also become aware of a project that was going on in Las Vegas at the time where the MGM Grand resorts figured out how to use blast chillers, this specialized factory scale piece of equipment that's been around since the 90s, to safely rescue prepared meals from their conventions. And so that was a huge breakthrough that wasn't getting a lot of traction in the nonprofit world. And so I started really kind of seeing there's these elements of the system where we could start creating traction and creating solutions that where we can see these seemingly intractable problems in different lights from an entrepreneurial perspective and really start approaching it from a different direction. And I was doing that essentially while trying to center community needs and center community ownership. And that's where a lot of my business development acumen came in, really just understanding like, how can we put this together? How can we make this strategy actually work for all of the stakeholders involved and not just have it be controlled by, another organization?
Man, that's powerful. Now, what inspired you to focus on urban food waste and turn it into what you call a regenerative gold?
The food waste aspect came later. I was really focused on the food access side. I've got a retail background. Granted, nightclubs are an unconventional retail location, but the principles are the same. So you're facing the customer, you're transacting goods for your services, you're going through this whole process. So a grocery store at its fundamental level is not really that complicated of a model. Our system makes it overcomplicated, and that overcomplicatedness itself is a big part of the reason why these systems don't work in low income urban and rural communities that basically can't support these complex supermarket models. They're hemorrhaging food and resources all the time. I use my hands a lot when I get excited, and essentially, it's just not a really good market fit for a lot of communities. And unfortunately, that's created this dynamic called food deserts. It was recognized by the USDA. That's the name they use. A lot of community groups call it food apartheid because realistically, this is a problem that could be fixed and it should be fixed. And the institutions that we're placing our trust in to solve these problems really aren't focusing on solving the problem so much as maintaining the problem. And I think that is something that we as community groups need to recognize. It's time for us to really step into the role of leadership and start building the systems that we need from the ground up. So the food
Now,
rescue came in much later from that and started turning into a whole system that I developed. And essentially at this point, we've gotten to the point where we have an entire circular system on the back end of pretty much any urban community that ties it into as a bridge mechanism to the farming community. So we can get resources flowed back out of cities. We can get resources, if they're still good to eat, we can get them back into communities. We have the mechanisms to be able to control temperature, to be able to distribute the food in ways that adhere to health department standards. And so understanding, again, navigating the system and understanding like what are the paths available and how can we manipulate the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to navigate these paths effectively as a community. That's kind of the message that I put out.
now, is this something you see going on for example, like with Elon Musk and the whole Doge thing? Is this something you see where if you had the resources, could you take this nationwide?
Not Elon, but perhaps his brother. He's a chef here in Colorado. And, if we were able
Really?
to get in touch with folks like that, that understand that their position as food producers and their networks with the supply chains and with the farmers and all of the community leaders that we need to get in touch with, basically there's a movement that's been going on for quite a while called farm to fork. And that's where you really track and you understand where your food's coming from. And so we've got it to the point here in Colorado. I've been to some summits and we've got it to the point where from the farm to the loading dock and to the customer, like we've got that process kind of figured out, and we're really starting to create local and regional connections and food hubs, and we're really starting to figure out like what does this look like at a regional level? What does it look like when we start stepping away from some of these increasingly shaky global dynamics where we see the wheels starting to come off the bus and we start to recognize, oh, we better put some systems in place because maybe we're going to see some empty shelves, and maybe we need to lean more heavily into local and regional capacities, and maybe that's a potential path where we can create resiliency and adaptation that could, if replicated and scaled to large enough matters, actually affect climate and affect how our climate system works, at least in the microclimate that we live in. And all of these are really important things to discuss. And we can let's get into the big picture stuff. Well, climate change is a real deal at this point. I don't think, very, very few people at this point are doing the flat earth thing anymore. When you can look outside your window and actually see these changes. So the question is, what do we as communities do about it? Do we keep relying on these legacy institutions and these systems that were built with the assumption that we have an underlying fundamental stability? Or do we recognize that we're moving into an area where we're not necessarily sure where the ground is anymore, and we need to develop some adaptation capacity to be able to navigate these systems together? And so that's again, this is just kind of a general theme that I kind of go through with people. There's a huge onboarding process because most people grow up thinking linearly. You think I've got a problem, I need a solution. We're going to move from here to there, A to B. That's kind of how we're taught. That's how our school system works. That's how our society works. But if you start learning to think systemically, and there's actually organizations like Regenerative Institute that I've been through that'll teach you frameworks for how to actually expand your thought processes and think from different directions, apply a process of place mechanisms and other things that can help you look at things from a different angle and to be able to really truly understand like what is the potential of where we can go and what are the instruments that we can use and all of these things. And it kind of changes the narrative about how we approach all of this.
How does HumiSoil work, and why is it such a game changer in food system adaptation?
HumiSoil is amazing. So HumiSoil it's an ag tech. So it's an agricultural technology that came out of Australia. It was developed by a company called VRM Biologic, and they are absolute powerhouses. They've been interviewed in front of the UN. There's COP28 in 2023. There's actually a video out there about their entire process. And basically what this stuff does is they identified and harnessed a bacteria that uses photosynthesis the same way plants use photosynthesis. And what it does is, instead of creating sugars and then having a byproduct that pulls oxygen out of the air, this actually, or that pulls water out of the system, it actually creates water molecules in its process. So what it does is it transforms food waste, agricultural waste, fire mitigation waste, so beetle kill, deadwood trees that cause fires out here in the Southwest US. All of these are major challenges. This is a product that we can essentially use to inoculate all of that waste and turn it into a very high quality topsoil that literally grows water from soil, and it makes nutrients more bioavailable, so it helps to restore degraded soil. So these are two major challenges that we're dealing with, and this is a product that has the potential for really changing the game about how, again, how we approach these things. The challenge is that there's a huge market mismatch here in the US. This product's been around for 33 countries and counting around the world, and here in the US it's lagging because we have a market mismatch. We've got a lot of money invested in composting systems. We've got a lot of reliance on existing industry to be able to basically adapt new functions. And what we're finding out is a lot of these industry professionals and a lot of these companies that have so much established presence here in the US and different states, they just don't want to do it. They may have millions of dollars invested in their existing processes, and this process is coming in and it's essentially a competition for their own market. And so that's creating a situation and an opportunity for us in the regenerative practitioner world, for farmers, for community activists to essentially step up and take on the role of distributor for this product, bring it in as an instrument for change in these directions, and actually look at this from a completely different perspective from what we've been seeing so far. So the regenerative world is extremely robust. It's been around for, a long time, decades, and they pull wisdom from ancient practices to essentially restore degraded soil and essentially like claw back some of the damage that we're collectively causing on the planet. The problem is that process itself is traditionally and historically project based. So you'll have a plot of land and you'll go do a bunch of things to make that plot of land restored over time. And it's a very long, laborious process, and you have to go through onboarding with a bunch of stakeholders. And it's a really big challenge. What we can do is we can approach it from a systemic level and collectively identify a strategy and a product that will allow us all to operate at a higher level. And if we approach that as like, hey, let's come in as a coalition and let's bring this here so that we can all use this tool. We can get the tractors, we can get the distributor license, we can get the breweries and the wineries connected with the farmers and the ranchers, connected with the cities and the municipal offices, and we can actually create this as a common goal. And that's what we're trying to do here in Colorado. Unfortunately, what I'm finding out is that it's actually easier to have this conversation with folks in the Caribbean and in Europe and in Africa and in South America than it is right here at home, because of these challenges that we're dealing with that are specific here in the US.
We've got hundreds of thousands of people that watch the TV show and read the magazine and stuff. But talk to the specific, if there's one person watching this, who are they as far as everything from age, occupation, marital status, gender, the way they vote, and break that down to a single, your perfect listener right now who you'd like to be connecting with?
Wow. So that's actually a really tough question for me because I come from the nightclub world. I come from kind of the edge of society, and I learned a lot of my skill sets and a lot of my perspectives from that world. So one of the challenges that I'm dealing with is that I'm approaching, middle America and saying, hey, we have these powerful tools out here on the edges of food rescue, out here in the places where industry has abandoned us, and we have the ability to solve these problems. So if you're the type of person that's concerned about the fact that pretty much across the board in any state in the US, about 10 to 15% of us are food insecure, sometimes more. If you're concerned about the fact that we don't have add value processing for our farmers, and sometimes they have to ship their harvests out of state in order to get processed and then be non competitive in their own market. If you're concerned about the fact that we have rampant out of control fires across the US and it's getting worse, and if this stuff concerns you, then you're my target audience. So I don't know what the demographic is. I don't know if you're, a well-to-do housewife that's looking for a garden situation that's low maintenance, because I know people that will absolutely show permaculture strategies at the, suburban level. Or if you're looking at the bioregional level, like, hey, we're trying to solve these problems. If you're looking global at the policy level and starting to understand that policy is not the only way to solve these problems. If you're just somebody who understands common sense and wishes there was more of it in the world, that's who I'm talking to.
I love that. Now, is there I know you've got a free ebook. We'll mention that in a minute here. But is there something where they could jump on if somebody's got a project or something that they'd like to have you work with them on? Do you offer a free discovery call or a way to get in contact with you on that?
Absolutely. So my website is livingsys.org. That's SYS, like short for system. And you can contact me, Shannon, at livingsys.org. You can read my blog pages. I write a lot. The ebook is actually published on Amazon as a paperback as well. And there's an audiobook. You can get in touch and connect with me in a number of ways. But I want to talk about some specific projects that are bubbling here in Colorado now, especially one that's close to your location out on the Western Slope.
Paonia, right?
I think it was 2 years ago. I was heading out to Peonia to meet my mom. She's coming up from Albuquerque. I grew up there, and I brought my RV trailer, and she brought her motorcycle, and basically we connected up and did some riding around there, and we were at a BMW motorcycle rally. Well, when I arrived in town, I had never been to Peonia before, and I didn't realize that there's basically no cell service in town. So when I got in there, I couldn't figure out where my mom was. And so I'm driving down the street and I saw this ice cream shop, and I went inside and I asked them if they had Wi-Fi, I asked them if I could use their phone, did that whole number. And while I'm sitting there trying to find my mom, who was, a block away at the park, and we connected up. And while I was there, I was reading some of the literature, and I found out that this is a nonprofit organization called the Learning Council. And so this nonprofit is agriculturally focused, and they are a gleaning organization. And gleaning basically means you pick up whatever food the market doesn't take. So the ugly food, the stuff that doesn't, a lot of times it gets turned back into the
All the seconds.
the dirt and you waste it. Yeah. And so what they do is they go around and they collect that, and they have a commercial kitchen in the back of the ice cream shop, and they turn it into really cool stuff, and they distribute it out through the community. So they've got educational process. It's a really cool organization. Anyway, I ran into the executive director in the back of the building. I was literally just wandering through the building at that point, just fascinated. And we started talking, and I sat down and we chatted for about a half an hour. I asked her if she knew what a blast chiller was, and her eyes lit up. And she immediately was like, "Oh, I know exactly what a blast chiller is." And she started rattling off the things that their organization could do if it had one. And so I started talking about the MGM Grand and what was going on in Vegas, and how we had this multiple millions of dollars research that was accomplished to basically determine that these blast chillers could be used as a food rescue vehicle. And she got really excited. And so I asked her, "Hey, what other refrigeration do you need?" She said, "We really need a refrigerated truck so that we can get more of the fruit back to the kitchen to save it before it goes bad, in transit." And so we started hatching this plan of, like, if we could get about $100,000, we can get them a blast chiller, we can get them a refrigerated truck, and we can literally show them how to upgrade their capacity with a one-time investment that would allow them to X their impact. And so that's the big thing that we're doing at that end. And then we're basically doing the same thing down in the Caribbean. We're connected up with a fellow down there that's an educator. He's connected with solid waste management. They're very excited about the idea of applying this thing that happened in Vegas to their situation. And, like, what might that look like if you intersect with cruise ships and hotel resorts and private planes and all kinds of different areas where you just have food that doesn't get used. It's just, for whatever reason, if you're at the convention, half the people went to the golf course instead of lunch. It happens, but you have to engineer too much food because you have to. I mean, that's how the system works. You have to be prepared in case 100% of butts are in seats.
Yeah.
And that never, ever happens. The road closes, there's a diversion, there's a ball game. As a retailer, you just learn to realize that this is the reality of life. But as edge runners, we have the opportunity to essentially put systems in place to be able to capture those resources before they hit the ground, get them back into communities safely, and really just connect these dots in ways that have never really been thought through before.
I love that. So we're going to go to commercial break real quick here.
Okay.
Check this out, these billboards. I would love to put you on the cover, put your face on the cover of Newswire magazine, so you can kind of picture what your face would look like on the cover. And I'll chop out that part I just said there, but
No, don't chop it out. Honestly, we need the exposure. We need help. The biggest, if there's a call to action in this conversation, it's that if we can get support to get my face on a billboard, to get my audio voice out there to talk about these strategies, to get videos out so that more people understand that we are not helpless. So, I mean, I don't have the money for a billboard. I'll tell you that right now. But if somebody does and they want to support us, I'll absolutely take it. We can take donations, we can take support, we can take sponsorship. One of the things that we're patterning after, there's a nonprofit organization called Project for Public Spaces. I know you're trying to go to commercial. Let's talk about that after.
No worries.
Okay.
No, keep going. We're good.
Okay, so let me tell you about this organization. I found out about them when I was researching for the grocery store in Reno. And this is an amazing organization. They've been around for like 35 years. They teach municipalities how to build more friendly spaces where their communities can actually use the spaces. Like it's incredible work in and of itself. About a decade ago, they started this pilot program with Southwest Airlines called the Heart of Community Program, where Southwest donated $250,000 towards a community market, and Project for Public Spaces donated another $250,000 in expertise. And they would do community engagement meetings and focus groups and really dial in that engagement process so the community was involved with building this thing on the ground that ended up being everybody's thing. And so they've done this for years, and I think they stopped it in 2019, right before COVID. But we want to essentially do the same thing here, but apply that towards the systemic elements that will allow us to put the food rescue in place. And so if we've got, if we connect up with folks out there that are running, Fortune 500 companies, and you're looking for a way to create true impact that's not just, you know, a change on your bottom line sheet. If you're looking for ways to really support community in a way that communities can actually own and control over time, like this is a path to that we can work on together.
This interview is sponsored by Newswire magazine. We celebrate the entrepreneurs and thought leaders shaping the future, those who don't just adapt, but innovate, who inspire others to think bigger, lead boldly, and create lasting change. Only a select few are featured in Newswire magazine, and for those who earn a place on the cover, the opportunities are unmatched. Your story shared with a global audience, your achievements celebrated on national billboards, reaching millions. Every leader has a story. Every vision deserves a platform. Who will rise to the top? Stay tuned. You're witnessing greatness unfold.
Hey, welcome back to Success, Motivation, and Inspiration. We're on with Shannon Dobbs. Hey, Shannon, what is your upstream intervention approach, and why does it matter more than quick fixes?
So my approach was inspired when I was living down in Baja, Mexico. After I left Reno in 2020, right before COVID, actually, we went across the border 2 months into COVID in the beginning of April of 2020. And I ended up hiding under a very pretty rock down in Ensenada for a year and a half. It was a great opportunity to just reset, just really kind of heal a little bit from the pressure cooker that was Nevada, and just kind of get a different perspective. And one of the things that I saw while I was down there, I became friends with my landlord, and we were chatting one day, and they were talking about how the colonias, which is the Spanish word for neighborhoods, were dealing with kind of the same problem that all the way through Mexico has always dealt with, is the water system is functionally is just dysfunctional. And so a lot of places, almost everywhere in the country you go, you have to get bottled water, or you have to figure out a way to clean your water, or you're going to get sick. And it's just commonly recognized across the country. It's not a great situation. And the problem is that the country's infrastructure is so old and so outdated, and they use, some materials maybe that they shouldn't have in some places. And so it's an upstream problem. And so what these colonias were doing was absolutely amazing. What they were doing was identifying an upstream area that was upstream of their neighborhood, and then identifying a point where they could put a filtration system just for their neighborhood and just for the downstream, like where they were at and below. And then once they got that filtration system in, they were able to replace just the pipes in their neighborhoods and have a defined kind of point of troubleshooting. And coming from the troubleshooting department, I've worked for the cable company, I've worked for, computer companies as tech support. That's the thing you do, is if you can define where the systemic effort is, if you can eliminate all the other problems and really just focus on one defined element, you can engineer a solution. This works in 100% of situations. And so I took so much inspiration from how they were doing that in their communities and how they were creating these solutions, that I decided to really take another look at the food system and where can we apply upstream elements and upstream solutions to our own systems in ways that we don't have to wait for the entire system to get fixed, because realistically, it's not going to happen. The whole system's never going to get fixed. That's the problem.
Are you connected with Ivan Ans yet with Equity and Help? He's a Fortune 500, maybe a Fortune 50 company owner.
Not, I
Connect
don't,
with
I
Ivan?
don't
If
run
not,
into
I'll connect you.
circles, man. Like I've been running nightclubs for the last 20 plus years. I wish I knew more of the people that were running it. That's the challenge, is that, down here in the grassroots world, we're doing everything we can to try and get our hands on equipment and supplies and strategies. And a lot of that is common access for folks that are running at the policy levels, that are running at the Fortune 500 level. So what we're trying to do here is connect these dots so that the corporations and the policy leaders can understand that there's an entire world down here at the ground level of capacity that they're not aware of, because it just doesn't ever never percolate up to that level.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to connect you guys. He's out of Argentina, but real sharp dude. I think you guys could tie together real well as far as
Fantastic.
you're helping your company grow.
Cool.
How come communities implement all your strategies without, or implement some of your strategies without waiting on institutional permission?
So here's the key. We have a lot of resources that we don't necessarily know we have. I've talked to folks in churches, in Kiwanis, in boys and girls clubs, in schools, in hospitals, in all kinds of institutions, and they all have functional commercial kitchens. Sometimes they only operate them once a month. I mean, it's kind of sad seeing how much money organizations put into infrastructure because they've got an annual gala that they want to put on, and the rest of the year it just sits dark, or maybe somebody does yoga in the morning or something in the space, but like it doesn't get functionally used. Now we've got this one piece of equipment, this blast chiller that costs less than $10,000, that's shaped like a refrigerator, like a tall skinny refrigerator, that you can shove in a corner. It takes 110 volt, doesn't require installation. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer. But it's not just the equipment, it's the system that you build. They've got so caterers use these things called hot boxes, and they're essentially, they'll take any sort of food and you can put it in there and it'll maintain temperature up to 6 hours for that hot box. Longer if you take, they've got these like pad things that go in there and you heat them up and then it just radiates that heat back into the food. So it protects the food so that you can go out to the remote area, you can serve it on the beach, do whatever the BS that, the caterers is asked to do. That same equipment, which only costs a couple $100, can be used to transport food from all over town by volunteers back to where the blast chiller is. So think about a neighborhood level initiative. Like we were talking, one of the things that my grocery store initiative has evolved into is a food hub that takes over restaurant spaces. So the restaurant space, we all know what a restaurant kind of looks like. Everybody has a bare familiarity with the business model of what a restaurant is. But the actual physical structure of the restaurant has some components that can be changed out if you have creative business modeling. So we can take that commercial kitchen, retool it as a last mile food rescue location, and then rip out some or all of the seating area, turn it into a small grocery store area, and then turn the parking lot into a location for a farmer's market, and then put the park across the street as a location for community yoga. And now we've got a functional food hub. And it doesn't take that much to make this thing. But the thing is, the magic of an anchor location, the magic of a brick and mortar store in a community it's indescribable how much impact it has. It increases property values, it reduces urban blight, it creates walkability factor, it acts as an economic anchor to bring other businesses into the community. The problem is we're just so stuck on the supermarket model that we don't think to look back at what we had before. For hundreds of years, we had dry goods stores in this country. For hundreds of years, we had successful, workable business models that, they operated across all spectrums in every community, no exceptions. Now we've got this crazy addiction to one business model, and we need to step away from that. So I understand that this TV show is based on entrepreneurism, and that's what we need to lean into. We need to lean into the understanding that we have a market system in the United States and in these other countries that is perfectly functional at solving our problems. But then we've also got this distribution sector, this nonprofit sector, this charitable world that's developed, since the 1960s and 70s and even before that. And we've essentially abdicated our collective responsibility to them to solve these problems. And they fundamentally do not understand the market. So if you're an entrepreneur out there and you see value with this, frickin' do it. There's nothing stopping you from starting a successful business. We're basically building the model out as a franchise. Like, let's talk. Let's figure out, how to get our models into your hands. And you don't need institutional permission. You need the laws and codes and policies in your community, in your region, in your city, in your state. You don't need to ask me for permission. I share this stuff freely all the time. You can go on my website, livingsys.org, and download my ebook. I'm not in this for the profit. I'm in this so that we collectively can understand that we have a lot more tools at our disposal.
Now, instead of franchising, being a franchisor, I wonder if you ever looked at being a licensor?
What I'm actually looking at right now is I'm teaching community groups how to use alternative or just slightly unconventional investment models to be able to bring investors to the table directly. So rather than licensing this and trying to create an IP disaster and doing all this shit, like I'm in this for community good. So even though I understand the mechanisms, my goal is not to employ them in the same way that they're being employed. So they've got a model called the land syndication model. And so everybody's kind of familiar with the venture capitalist thing. The investor invests in your business, and then they want you to grow your business until they can cash out and make a profit. And that's the extractive model. The land syndication model is specifically for land-based development projects. So anything tied to farmland, anything tied to retail, anything tied to logistics, all of that is land developed at its basis. And so we can create a vehicle where investors can come in as limited partners for a 10-year period, identify an opportunity zone, which here in Colorado is Fort Lupton. It's a perfect area close to the airport, less than 10,000 people. So it's a rural community, but it's a half hour away from my girlfriend's house in Northglen. And so it's a great opportunity that like we've got, okay, so here's 40 to 120 acres. Here's a living systems business model. Here's a way that we can put a commercial kitchen into a community to be able to coordinate flows of resources. Here's HumiSoil, which is a groundbreaking opportunity to be able to bridge these resources into extremely valuable agricultural amendments. And then we've got a retail opportunity to literally open up new markets for farmers into inner city communities and provide a stake in urban food security for the farmers by giving them that ability to get into areas that the supermarkets can't go. This is a perfect storm of business opportunity. So I mean, we look at it as the grassroots level. I'm looking at it as what happens at the end of that 10 years. We can essentially have a community trust buy out and refinance at that point successful business model. The investors go away happy. They get a reasonable return on their investment. And we have the engine is now up and running. That's the goal.
Man, that's awesome. So you've been listening to Shannon Dobbs here. Really great conversation. If you guys want to get involved, I would highly recommend get on if you've got the funds, if you've got the ability to do a donation, tax-free donation. No, this is a 501c3, correct?
It is organized as a church structure and as a public benefit company. So it is legally able to receive donations, but until we get our 501c3 designation, which is going to take a few $1,000s, so the donations would help, we can't supply the paperwork from the IRS. So that's the challenge that we're navigating right now because we're just forming. So basically we're looking for support from folks that don't necessarily care about that stuff right now. Once we get through the paperwork process, then we'll have all those designated documents that we'll be able to pass out.
So if you're watching this right now on Amazon Fire TV, if you're on a newer smart TV, pause the screen, scroll down. There'll be a link you can click to get to the actual Newswire magazine article if we feature you there. But if nothing else, go to livingsys.org, click the donate now button. Just give what you can, try to help get this off the ground. And then also, it looks like there's a free ebook that I'd really recommend you get over here, click this download ebook. You can have that sent directly to your smartphone or whatever your favorite smart device is, and just get connected, maybe schedule a free discovery call with Shannon.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts or
just, there's an audio book as well, whatever's the best way that people consume information. We're trying to hit all of the angles. If you like to read, I got a lot of articles on my blog page that really delve into just kind of deep dives into different aspects of this. And I do have an upcoming book that I'm writing right now called The Edge Runner's Guide to Unconventional Resource Acquisition. And this is going to be the capstone that my previous 3 books are going to be deep dives into. And we're going to really kind of bring this out as a series so that people have a full and complete understanding of how our system works and how we can navigate it more efficiently to tackle climate change, to tackle food insecurity, food access, waste, all of these things that are, a lot of people say are impossible. I say, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Awesome, man. It's been so great to have you on the show. I just appreciate your time, Shannon.
My pleasure, Curtis. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been awesome. We'll have to stay connected. I know we're both in Colorado here, so we'll maybe grab some coffee soon here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Very cool.
Thanks for watching Success, Motivation, and Inspiration. This episode was designed to help you level up. See you next time.